Well, g'day everyone. Dave here. I'm joined now by Paul Brennan. Paul is the mission pastor at Tron Church in Glasgow. And we've got him on because he's going to explain for you, if you're in the UK or maybe even in the US, but particularly if you're in the UK, how the mission calendar works in your crazy, weird, 18-month summer holiday weird thing that I can never get my head around. But Paul's been there, he's done that, he's doing it. And he's been responsible for mission there for a while. In fact, why don't I stop talking? Paul, g'day. Tell us, how long have you been at Tron? How long have you been overlooking evangelism there? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at Tron for 12 years, unbelievably. Started in 2012, and about 5 years ago, we rejigged the team, and I was given responsibility for evangelism. And at the time, I was like, why me? But muddling my way through.
Good on you, mate. We're talking calendars, and I suppose the big win for the calendar is that it just provides you with the emphasis and the impetus to proactively plan and make sure that happens, and make sure that you focus on the things that matter. Yeah, when did you start thinking about calendars and organizing things in the way that we're talking about now?
So I guess fairly early on, once I've been given the job for mission in the church, began to think about planning ahead and trying to line up different events we were doing in terms of mission. So I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I'd say at the beginning didn't do it very well, but I've learned over time about how to do things slightly better. But yeah, so I've been thinking about it from almost the start, but it's needed a bit of refining over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, good on you, mate. Well, without further ado, here's what's going to happen. We're going to look at the mission calendar, and it's split up into two separate calendars. Hopefully, you've already watched some of the content and worked out that we talk about the two conversions. So the first conversion is the conversion of the non-Christian from dead to disciple, and so that's a pathway. So the first calendar we'll look at is a mission pathway. That's about evangelism to non-Christians. So that's all the things that they're doing. The second calendar we'll look at is the one that's called Mission Heat, and that's the one that's actually aimed at Christians, getting them pumped up for evangelism. So I'll chuck them on the screen now just so you see. And Paul, I'll just explain quickly the categories, what everything means, and then hand over to you. So at the top in the horizontal level, you can see it's done by month and by term with holidays. That's pretty straightforward. On the left-hand side, the vertical level, there's 5 separate categories. Contact and connect, conversion engine. Those are mission pathway terms. So contact, how you're engaging with the outside community; connection, how you're connecting with them. I've got written there church's primary. And by that, I just want us to constantly remember that pre-evangelistic events and contact and connect events are often a complete waste of time, because the largest connection and contact you have with non-Christians all the year long is at church on Sundays. Now, Paul, that's certainly true in Australia. Scotland, godless Scotland, is that true?
It is exactly the same. So if you had spoken to me 5 years ago, we were running all the different sort of pre-evangelistic stuff you could think about. Curry nights, quiz nights, all that
You
kind
love
of
curry
jazz.
nights. You love curry nights, you guys. You're
We
obsessed
do
with
love
them.
a good curry. We need it through the winter here. But yeah, so we run all these kind of things as contact events
So
with
pre-evangelistic events, in essence, is that what we're saying?
exactly with almost nothing to show for it. After doing loads of effort, repeated these things. So it wasn't working. So we've really cut back entirely on that sort of thing. And as you just said, we see our Sundays as being absolutely key, because on any given Sunday, there's always going to be non-Christians present. And so we've tried to work really hard to identify who they are, follow them up. Because if someone's willing to come on a Sunday, then, they're interested.
Yeah.
So we want to follow them up properly.
It's funny, isn't it, that they're the people most likely to become Christians in Scotland.
Who would have
And
thought?
most of them, and most of them have arrived via invitation, or someone's brought them. Uh, it can honestly, it can appear as if we've got an aversion to converting people who are likely to be converted. No, they're not hard enough. No, they're not pagan. We want to go and reach, the person with a Richard Dawkins subscription, the two people who've got a Richard Dawkins
That's right.
subscription. Like, oh, that's what we've got to do. And listen, we want to reach people with Richard Dawkins, like, who read his books and whatever, but we also want to reach the people who are the most likely to be converted.
Like,
And
who's on your doorstep? Like, who have you got
yeah,
in front of you? And begin there.
and see them. Do you see them? Yeah, are they
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're in furious agreement as always, Paul Brennan. But we scroll down to the left, Contact Connect conversion engine, and that refers to the place you hope to see people converted at your church, the big ministry. That's an evangelistic course for you guys. It is for most churches seeing conversions, so evangelistic course. Then we've got Life of Church. Now that just means the rhythm of what you're doing at church throughout the year. And then a sermon series, how your sermon series interacts with those things. So without further ado, let's get to it. It's on the screen right now. You can see it there. Paul, take us from August, I guess, which is when your
Yep.
academic year starts.
Yeah, so we begin August. It's slightly earlier up here in Scotland than England. So that took me a while when I moved up to Scotland. I was used to the school year beginning early September, but in Scotland we're slightly earlier. Not quite as bright up here, so they need longer in school. So we have a longer first term. So we begin mid-August, and so we are beginning to prepare for the first of our evangelism courses, our first Discover course. So that takes place usually towards the end of September.
Yeah.
So
So just a quick word to say, I'm using the term Discover here to talk about your conversion engine. I'm only using that because that's the one that I've got. If you run Christian Explored or Life or whatever it is,
yeah,
chuck that in there. So that's just what that means. Same with follow up. We've got follow up generically written there, and that could be Firm Foundations, it could be Christian Explored, it could be whatever. But just so that you know that. Thanks so much, Paul. Keep going.
yeah, no, we actually use Life here, but for these purposes, Discover. So through August, we're getting things ready for that. So we're starting to advertise at church. So we bring folk up to the front at church, interview them about the life course, about
How many
Discover.
weeks? How many weeks advertising do you do?
Maybe five
Oh
Sundays
wow.
out.
Yeah.
We'd
Okay.
start to just drip it in. So that's notices from the front, but even better, it's getting folk up, interviewing them, sharing stories. We do that through our church emails, social media, and so on. So we're
Yep.
kind of building up over the weeks leading up. We're working very hard, those in the team, to identify the non-Christians around church. So that's actually the most effective way. It's chatting to folk and following up one-to-one,
Mhm.
seeing who's already in the building, who's already at church. So we're doing that all the way through August, September, and then we launch with Discover end of September, early October,
So
and that
just for the
runs for
for the
about 5 weeks.
English or the Northern Irish or the Welsh or whoever is watching,
Mm,
and because your term dates are slightly different, what
yeah.
week of term one would you start your evangelistic course?
So we would start maybe 5 weeks after this. Well, it depends because our schools go back mid-August, and then universities are kind of September, and we're quite a big university church, so we want to make sure we capture the students as well. So we give it maybe 5 or 6 weeks from the beginning of the school term. So it's quite a long lead in,
Yeah.
but it just gives us time to get everyone back and up and running.
Yep. And obviously that will change if you're watching, you're not near a university, that actually the
Yep.
people have come back earlier or do it earlier in the term. But you've just got to choose the time where it allows you to advertise to the most amount of people, to connect people in the same way.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. So yep, so you're running it. Okay, great. Yep. You've got stuff up there, Contact and Connect at the same time. What's happening there in October?
So in October, we're starting to really encourage folk to be inviting to church, to be inviting to life.
That's helpful. So that you're advertising up the front. Is that what you mean?
Yep. So from the front on a
Uh-huh.
Sunday, I mean that's our key moment to communicate
Gotcha.
these things.
Gotcha. Yep.
It's what we pray for. So when we're leading the services and praying, we're praying for upcoming Discover courses and praying for the lost in our city. So we want to be keeping that central to what we're doing in the life of the church. So just very clearly flagging to the congregation when the next Discover course is, so they can be inviting their friends. So making it
Sure.
very clear. I want our church members to think about two things in terms of their non-Christian friends. Try to keep it really simple. One, bring to church. Two, bring to discover. Just
Gotcha.
those two things.
All right. So moving through October, you've started Discover. You're doing those
Yep.
encouragements throughout. Discover finishes in October. Goes for so the course that you run. How many weeks does it go for? 4 or 5?
5 weeks. 5 weeks.
Five
So that
weeks.
finishes, and immediately following on from that, there's follow up. So
Mhm.
the very next week, we say, look, come back, same time, same place next week, same people, and we'll keep going. We're going to study a bit of the Bible together. It's very similar format to Discover, so it's very comfortable.
Yep.
The cakes take a bit of a downturn. The baking that we provide is slightly more basic, but
Yeah.
anyway.
So then in November you've got that. Now, sorry, Christmas, of course, in the UK has traditionally been this month really of I won't be too offensive, but I'd say missional distraction is a huge thing. But also, it's a good opportunity for mission heat, not so much for
Yes.
pathway activity. But you've got
Yep.
Christmas carols, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and in that space, you're advertising Discover. You've got people at church advertising church, but you've got the follow up group from the first Discover courses running over Christmas.
Yep.
So you're more.
Yep.
Can I just offer that I suppose you're leveraging off the normal activity of what you would do, right? Is that fair to say, rather than pouring a huge amount of effort into doing brand new things every Christmas? Hey, we're going to now do, 6 Christmas light journey spectaculars. But actually, no,
No,
we're always going to have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, so on.
yeah, so we've got a pretty steady pattern of what we do for Christmas. And the Sundays leading up, we have different kind of carol services. There's a traditional lessons and carols. So that kind of runs. And as you said, you might pick up some interested non-Christians, but it's a really beneficial time for building mission heat. The things that we talk about, we share videos of folk who become Christians through Christmas, that kind of stuff. So it's just keeping it on the front of the church's mind and encouraging them. But in terms of mission fruit from Christmas, it's minimal.
Yeah.
But
Well, let's crack on. And so we've
yep.
gone over Christmas. We're into January. Take us through, I suppose, to the summer.
Yeah, so through Christmas, we're advertising the next Discover course, which starts in January. So we would typically run a Discover course every term, so 3 times a year. But if I was launching out, starting something fresh, I'd probably start twice a year.
So we've got twice a year here on the calendar because this is really aimed at people who are starting something. And so starting at a level where you can build a sustainable ministry, which grows, and then start a third one in term 3. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So we would work hard through Christmas to be working towards the second Discover, which we launch mid-January. So we give ourselves a few weeks to recover from the early January blues, and we get things going mid-January, running Discover. So that happens through January into the middle of February, and then again we follow up with small group studies off the back of Discover. So it just keeps running, and we run that for months and months because people need a lot of follow-up.
Yeah. Well, brother, we'll move on. I see Easter in there as well, of course. Good Friday, Easter Sunday. We'll move on to mission heat in a moment. But just to say, one of the most startlingly obvious things about this calendar that you've given is its simplicity, and it almost looks bare, in comparison to there's very little, there's almost no pre-evangelism, contact connect events, that sort of stuff. That would be terrifying to a lot of people. That would be because the thought has been, hey, no, we've got to do these things to get the non-Christians in.
Yep.
How have you not how have you landed, but can persuade me in 1 minute why this is the best way to do things?
Well, I think you need simplicity for your church members, because if there's 100 different options, they're going to get confused about what to bring their friends to. I'm also pretty convinced that you want to have events where the gospel is absolutely central and is going to be proclaimed clearly, rather than just here's 5 minutes at the end of a curry night. So I'd much rather people be brought to something where they're going to get the gospel laid out pretty clearly. The other thing was, all these different events we were doing were just not effective. Like they were designed to take someone who's not a Christian, who's not around church, to help them step in towards church, but it just wasn't happening. So I remember we ran a big curry night. This was just before COVID, so way back. We had about 150 people in the room, 60 non-Christians, and we ran the Discover course a week or two afterwards. I had 3 people there, and mercifully COVID came along and cut it. But for me, it was just being able to look at it and think, actually, is this effective? Is this a good use of our time and energy for our church? And actually, simplicity was by far the best way to go. So I think, since we've moved to doing less, we've seen a lot more people coming, a lot more people engaging, a lot more people professing faith. So I think simplicity has been really valuable for us. And that's hard because we're sort of hyperactive with our evangelism. We want to run all these events and that's the answer, but actually being able to take a bit of a hard look, step back, what's the reality here? It's not easy to do that. It's quite hard to stop stuff, particularly things that the church is used to doing and that's dear to people's hearts. That can be quite hard.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
Difficult decisions. But
requires nuance as well. And you want to bring people on that journey, and flipping tables and cancelling things isn't the way, but actually envisioning and capturing the gospel heart behind a lot of these well-intentioned ministries and refocusing it, but you will lose people with frustration in that space. Super helpful, brother. Hey, listen, we'll pump down now to the mission heat pathway. Now, I'll just quickly clarify here what we're talking about again. This is about how you get Christians pumped up for evangelism. And the key difference in the left-hand column is that we've added in small groups, because small groups are a key way of building mission heat. Anytime you've got the word open around people. And so that's your Bible study, growth groups, whatever you call them, small groups there. And then I've added contact, connect together, really, in that space, just for spaces purposes. But of course, we don't do much of it. It's not that big a deal. So again, listen, I suppose, let me just say from the get-go that the conversion engine is the same. That's the same there. There's no real change. So no need to hit on that as much, but hit on those other things for us that you've got in Contact Connect, you've got in small groups. And if you're happy to kick us off, I guess, in August again, that'd be great.
Yep. So going from the top of the table down, so the first category is life of church. So that's kind of regular big events in the life of the church. So we would advertise, as we talked about, our Discover course through the summer, coming into August, September. Then the next kind of key event, we have sort of 2 new members baptism services every year, and the first of those is in November. So we have folk who join the church. We have our onboard course for folk joining the church.
And why is that in mission heat?
Because there are always going to be folk, God willing, who are new Christians and will be being baptized. So they join the church. If they're new Christian, they get baptized at the same time. So that service is a big service. A lot of people there, all the folk who are joining the church and those being baptized. So that's a great moment to be able to give thanks to the Lord for folk who've become Christians.
And how does that build? But how does that build? What's the connection there, I suppose, for the zeal for evangelism for the Christian?
Well, it's nothing better than seeing people become being baptized. So it's a very visible evidence of the Lord bringing people to life.
It is, yeah.
As folk are baptized. So it's
wonderful. Almost as if Jesus knew what he was doing with those sacraments, isn't it? That really bring flesh.
It's funny that.
It's weird, but there really is, the Christian crack of seeing people become Christians, which you get in an evangelist, of course, but testifying to his work and baptism. So it's funny because I think, though, that potentially we may have approached that in the past with going, no, this is an evangelistic opportunity because we're going to talk to the families of the non-Christians coming. But my perspective has been, no, it's good to do that, but you don't really get that much from that. What you get is mission heat. You get the Christians going, oh, yeah, this is something. Yeah.
So that's awesome. The last one we had, 2 guys from Muslim backgrounds were being baptized and, just wonderful. And, following on from that, in the following week, we'll maybe, share their stories, do a little video or
Yeah, that's awesome.
Get them to write their story down and share that with the church. So that's a really key moment. And then following on from that,
everyday evangelism WhatsApp. What's that?
yeah, so we started up a little WhatsApp group for anyone in the church that wants to join it. And on that, I will post occasional things to encourage people in their evangelism. So it might be a short video from someone in the church showing why they become a Christian. It might be a podcast that is encouraging us in our evangelism. Might be an article.
What's your most downloaded podcast on your Tron podcast network, Paul?
Oh, Dave, thank you for asking that question. It was one that featured yourself and me.
Oh, well, I'm embarrassed to
I mean,
bring it up. Yeah.
Got thumbs up there. Anyway.
Yeah, I saw that. Very impressive. Very impressive. No,
So
I digress.
Podcasts like the one we did, which talk about encouraging faith with evangelism is so.
If people want to hear that, for themselves who are listening now, what do they search for in Apple Podcasts?
So if you go to your podcast provider of choice, Google Tron Church and Team, I think we called it Team Evangelism or something like that. Team Sport. Anyway, you'll find it there on our church podcast.
They're really helpful. So that's just a light little touch. That's not particularly arduous. That you're just dropping pebbles. You're building the Great Wall of China with pebbles. You just the continual little disruption of evangelism. Yeah, it's super helpful.
Yeah, so once or twice a month, I don't want to inundate people, but once or twice a month, I'll stick something on that. And there's like a quarter of the church on that WhatsApp group. So that's a good chunk of the congregation that are getting that little reminder and little evangelism prompt. So we do that. We regularly encourage our small groups.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you got prayer for non-Christians in small groups, and we won't go into that except to say that's so obvious in bringing the heat up for us individually, also praying for the course that's happening and that kind of stuff as well. So you keep going. You got December now, I guess, is where I'm up to. New members baptisms here. December, advertising, discover, prayer, carols. Yep,
that's it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. In the last one, we did talk about Christmas not being the primary mission pathway event, but actually a great mission heat event. Same with Easter. Why is that?
Well, we are remembering the incarnation of the Lord Jesus Christ, and just through what we do by singing those carols, hearing those readings, it's reminding us of what Jesus came to do. And it's a great time for the church family to celebrate, to rejoice. And I think also encouraging folk to be inviting. It's an easy invite, Christmas. So in a sense, it's just getting it on the agenda again. It's reminding folk. I mean, I try and pour more energy into folk inviting on a normal Sunday, but Christmas is coming, and why not encourage folk to bring people to church? It's a good thing to do. So that just raises mission and that bringing culture. It's a good opportunity to do that.
And it's funny, we've hit on this, but just to clarify, stipulate it really clearly, that Christmas and Easter are not funnel events for your evangelism course, not in the way that we traditionally have thought. Because the non-Christian who comes at Christmas or Easter, they're the least likely non-Christian to return. You've hit on that. And so that doesn't mean don't use them. Use them, advertise, bring people to a good event, whatever. But what you need to do is have a paradigm shift about your evangelism course and realize that the greatest funnel for your evangelism course are your Christians who attend every week and your connection with the non-Christians who they bring along to church every week. So that is a paradigm shift and a really huge one, but hopefully a helpful one. We'll zip through now, mate, because I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. We get into term one, to January. Do you want to just talk me through from January to summer?
Yeah, January, we've got our Discover course in January, and again, coming up to Easter and just beyond Easter, we have our second new members service. So that takes place usually April, May time. And again, that's an opportunity for new baptisms, etc. Also around May, we have our sort of annual church meeting, and we've tried to make that as less business-like as possible. So we don't go on about the finances of the church, all that kind of stuff. It's really an opportunity to set the vision of the church and remind people what we're about. And so as the mission pastor, I'm always wanting to make sure that a big part of what we talk about at this big annual church meeting is mission. So we'll celebrate stories, and it's just an opportunity to remind folk and get mission high up on the agenda. So that's one of our key things in the life of the church. So making use of key meetings that happen. We have a congregational prayer meeting every 2 weeks. And so again, it's trying to make sure that mission is a key part of what we're praying for. So we'll make sure that's front and center as we pray as a church. So that's kind of it, really.
You've got Change Lives newsletter, Change Lives podcast. Now,
Yes.
The name is self-explanatory. I just want to. One of the things that people can do often when we hear ideas is we can go, oh well, I've got to do that. That's wow. And so, pour in a lot of effort and energy into something like. But is it fair to say that there's no point in having a Change Lives newsletter unless you're actually involved in ministries that are changing lives? So don't get distracted with, I want to produce this thing. That's going to be the silver bullet. No. This is all little pebbles that build heat.
Yep.
And is that fair to say?
Yeah. So the Change Lives thing is just a set of 3 stories from folk in the church about how they became Christians. So it's very encouraging. You can give it to your pals, but it might notch up the mission heat by 1%. But it's worth doing, and it just nudges it. So it's not the answer. I think that's probably the mistake I've made in the past, thinking, oh, I need to get the thing that's going to help us. And it's a small thing, and it just keeps it nudging along. But it's a whole bunch of things. It's lots and lots of different things together that keep mission at the front of our minds. So it's just chipping away, constantly chipping away.
I've heard it put. It's the law of. Now I'm going to get this wrong. The law of atrophy, and so rubber band. So you pull a rubber band, you stretch it out, but the minute you release it, it reverts back. Okay, and evangelism and evangelistic mission heat is not a switch on the back of our head. Oh, well, now I just care about the lost, and now I'm just going to evangelize people for the rest of my life, unless you're a gifted evangelist. For most of us, we require constant stretching, and we will require that till we're in glory, because we have a war waging inside our hearts between the flesh and the spirit, which does not intrinsically make us look at the world the way Jesus does. So that means our job as shepherds, pastors, leaders is to pull that rubber band of mission, just chip away that drum banging thing of that you've got someone dedicated to it, like yourself on staff, who's able to just speak to it continually. And that doesn't mean in every sermon that you're doing an application on it, but rather that you are advocating for the non-Christian. And just continual reminder. And it means that the emotional energy that you may have poured into these Silver Bullets podcasts and curry nights, whatever, you still do those things, but you just give them a little bit of, you just take all the heat out of it. You just go, not the mission heat. You take all the energy out of it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I think, I think one of the biggest things for mission heat is seeing folk become Christians and having folk from the church in your conversion engine course, so your discover course. So getting folk along, maybe not bringing a friend, but they can come. And when they see non-Christians engaging with the gospel, like you can just see the excitement in their faces. They just love it. So there's nothing better than getting folk involved in your course because they get to see the Lord at work. They get to hear the actual questions people actually have. They get to see them over time engaging with the gospel. So try and get other folk involved.
Oh yeah. And the team are the best advertisers for it either sucking or going well, and that they will be promoting that in one way or the other around the place. Now, mate, so helpful. Thank you so much. We'll talk again just about ministry specific stuff for the UK, for Scotland, for England, for you know what the UK is. So all that kind of stuff. But Paul, thanks so much for your time. Is there anything else? I suppose you got 1 minute with anyone who's a rector, a senior pastor, a minister, assistant minister, whoever, overseeing evangelism in the UK. and you could say, hey, just do this or don't do this, what would you say?
I would say beware of mission hyperactivity. Really think very carefully about the stuff you put on. And I think the less you can do, the better. I'll try and keep it to two things: Sundays and your course. If you can get the church praying for those two things, bringing folk to those two things, you will, I think, start to see mission fruit because you'll be able to focus and you're not being distracted. So that would be my thing. Do less, cut a lot of stuff, and focus on those key things.
Yeah, do less better. That's good. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, brother.
All right.
Catch you
Cheers.
soon.